to News Check. It's a morning when, we've got this fourth day of interviews for the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission is taking place. Former chair of the Kenya National Commission of Human Rights, Advocate Florence Jawoko, was interviewed this morning from 9:30. And next is Francis Wanderi, who is an education specialist. And before we go back to KICC, let's get into a conversation with an Advocate Counsel, Steve Mogaka. A good morning to you.
Good morning, viewers.
And Counsel, as we get in, our sign language interpreter, bottom right of your screen, is Len Saudingo. Counsel,
Yes.
emerging issues from the interviews that are coming around. One is the law that was enacted, but its operationalization was suspended until after the 2017 elections. The Election Finances Act, the Election Campaign Finances Act. What is the challenge that the Commission is going to face to implement this, working together with the banking industry and also with the political parties, the register of political parties?
Thank you. The actualization of the law on the ground is what IEBC is going to obviously have a challenge because unless all financing is going to be channeled through the banking system, it is going to be extremely difficult to police candidates to know how much has been expended by any particular candidate. I know the parliament itself is finding a challenge passing that law because election results in this country are sometimes directly proportional to the amount of money expended. So it's going to be a challenge, but it's good thinking because it's one way of trying to sift and reduce the passing through into our legislatures of people who have used money which they have not earned.
The other thing is the monitoring of it and trying to actualize, because for example, if you put an advertisement on KBC channel 1, we will tell you that for this 30 seconds we will charge you X amount of money. Then how do they because for most of these commissioners we've seen experts in finance and also communications coming in. What's going to be the role when looking at the eventual balance of the commissioner's background?
Essentially, as we grow as a democracy, we can develop rules and regulations for actualizing this. And just like we make it a requirement that every candidate makes a declaration with the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, this law can be actualized because it is expected that anybody seeking an electoral position is expected to, declare and if possible publish their income and expenditure account, particularly relating to the election. And we can make it an offense for any person who withholds such information to make it, mandatory on every person to be able to be honest enough to say, if I'm elected as a parliamentarian, this is how much money I have expended. And if evidence is brought that you actually withheld or spent more than you are declaring, then that should constitute a reason for losing that particular seat you're being elected to. So it can be actualized, but the goodwill of Kenyans is required, both the electorate, the candidates, and the governance institutions that we have put in place.
Let's talk about the political rights, because these have got to be protected. And this is number one, to be registered as a voter, to vote by secret ballot. That is at T83. Mm-hmm. And also there is the case of protecting the special interest groups, persons with disabilities, people who may have the elderly when it comes to who may not have the capacity to sign but may use thumbprints and may require that they have somebody assisting them when it comes to cast the ballot. What is the path with this one?
That is, by the way, one of the biggest challenge we have. I know the law has tried to make provisions for use of biometrics, but the right of a citizen to be registered as a voter, the right to vote, is so sacrosanct that that is the last thing that any voter should be deprived. And that is the reason why, where there are challenges, I don't know how we need to actualize this, but it is mandatory that the Electoral Commission and the other actors make it possible that every candidate who is vying for an election, whether with physical or challenges or disabilities, they are enabled to do so.
What about
equally as a voter? Yeah, because we find that during electoral times there are voters who are hospitalized, and we haven't seen the Electoral Commission responding to those people who are admitted in hospitals and are not able to vote. We haven't seen a response by even officials of the Electoral Commission, those who are presiding over the voting exercise and counting. Their rights to vote are violated because these people are registered as voters in different stations, and they are deployed to be electoral officers in different polling stations, and therefore they are deprived of their right to vote.
It's an employment hazard.
Yes. No. I mean, there is no employment that should deprive your very right to have a say on who is going to be a leader in this country, and even security officers. So there really needs to be a mechanism where, like, for those who are going to be actively involved in the management of the election, there needs to be a system for early voting so that we don't deprive anybody of their
Quickly,
right.
two constituencies people do not take serious: the diaspora and the correctional services. Briefly, how do we then enhance registration and participation of these people, because they have the rights as per the Constitution of Kenya 2010?
If we embrace ICT like we have during this COVID time in virtually every sector, there is no reason anybody in the diaspora, wherever they are, should not be able to vote. And really, it is up to us. If we have the goodwill, we can be able to achieve that. With technology, nothing can be beyond our reach.
Advocate Steve Mogaka giving his thoughts onto the process and what is enshrined in the Constitution. That's where we were focusing on, because the role of the Independent and Electoral Boundaries Commission is set out in the Constitution. It's only a commission that's named independent in the country. Well, let's find out more about those people who want to take office of commissioner. And speaking now is Mr. Francis Wanderi, who is facing the selection panel that's led by Dr. Elizabeth Muli at the KICC.
Department of Business Education in that school,
where the selection panel for 4 new commissioners of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission are holding interviews, and the person who is being interviewed right now is Mr. Francis Wanderi. He's a former director of the Export Processing Zones Authority. He has a Bachelor's of Education, plus he has also studied education management, and he's ventured into business. He is now being interviewed by Dr. Faradim Abdallah, who is one of the members of that selection panel that's chaired by Dr. Elizabeth Muli. My name is Daniel Wahome, and a very good afternoon to you. We continue with conversations around what's happening today, and together also with our guest in studio. We've got Counsel Steve Mogaka. Our sign language interpreter is Lensa Odingo. News stories that are going on besides what we've got what we were watching right now. There is the launch of a book, Beyond Politics. This is a conversation with the governor of Meru County, the Honorable Kiraitu Murungi, and this was put together by veteran journalist Jerry Rogene. That book is being launched today, and the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Honorable Just Muturi, is the chief guest at that event. Governor Muturi will be launching that book, Conversations About the Politics in the Country, by the Honorable Kiraitu Murungi, who is the governor of Meru County, and most of the editorial work done by veteran journalist Jerry Rogene. Also happening at the High Court, we've got the murder case that involves Migori County Governor Okoth Obado, and this is happening right now. It's a matter that's being heard, and our reporter Sarafina Robi will be giving us updates as the prosecution has started presenting its witnesses in the case, including the Chief Government Pathologist Johansen Oduor is among the witnesses who have been giving their evidence, the prosecution side of the story this morning. Let's now get back to the conversation of the key story that's going on right now. We shall be having the interviews, and after the interview of Mr. Francis Wanderi in the afternoon, we shall have former LSK Vice Chair Harriet Chigai, who is going to be interviewed by the panel from 2 o'clock. Now, Council, let's talk about some of the things that are coming out from these interviews, and everyone has looked back at the previous commissioners. Remember, you can basically say this is what the third phase for the IEBC. When it was initially instituted, the team under Mr. Chebukati that was in charge of the 2017 elections, and now another body has got to do this. For you to apply for this job, it means that you've got to accept that certain aspects of your professional and at times personal life be brought to the fore, and how then does this place a heavier burden of the responsibilities of leadership on any candidate?
Thank you. By the way, among the independent commissions we have in the country, the Independent Electoral Commission seems to be having a very relatively more critical role than other commissions, because the development of this country depends on the leadership that we put in place to manage the public resources in this country. And the bulk of those leadership, particularly in the legislature, whose primary role is oversighting the executive in the implementations of policy, the legislature therefore requires to be a very smart legislature. I dare say that a country is only as prosperous as its legislature can make it. And therefore, IEBC being the gatekeepers of who is it that assumes the legislature and the executive, they bear a more critical responsibility for the leadership that can take this country to wherever we want to be lies on their shoulders. And that is the more reason, therefore, that the person seeking to be commissioners in IEBC, first of all, must be beyond reproach.
Caesar's wife.
It must be beyond Caesar's wife, if you want to say so. And therefore, this is not a commission for any Tom, Dick, and Harry. And Kenyans and our select panel need to know that the prosperity and development of this country really, by and large, depends on how well IEBC do their job. And that job starts from who assumes office as commissioner, and thereafter who presides over the management of our election, because therein lies who is it that is going to lead the executive, who is it that is going to lead the legislature. And imagine the legislature vet virtually everybody who takes a position both in the judiciary and the executive. So I must confess that our country has not done very well in the management of who do we ultimately get as a legislature in this country.
And for you, that process is basically, that's the voter's role. But for you to even become a member of the National Assembly, a member of the County Assembly, you must be a registered voter, and continuously the management of the voter roll is coming at, every time a candidate is there, the management of the voter roll is there. We've had the candidates being asked where they are registered as voters, basically to declare just in case they've got a conflict of interest. What needs to be done so that your records do not disappear, do not tend to, people say they disappeared or you can't find your record when you go to vote?
Thank you. A very good question for that, because I recall from the evidence that was tendered in the BBI case, IEBC were reporting that from 2017, they have managed to register about 140,000 voters.
New voters,
for that matter. Of course, they have not updated the register. A lot more than 140,000 have died or ought to have been removed from the voters register. Meaning, if you ask me, judging by that alone, one gets scared on whether IEBC is actually doing its job, because one hopes that through the continuous registration of voters, we should have seen a deliberate effort, because those IEBC branches lying all over the Republic are doing nothing.
The question then is, because before you blame the IEBC, because the IEBC can come and speak and pick council, kuja ujiandikishe, is the education part which is required of them by law. It's basically known as civic education. How much of it is continuously being done? And number two, is there a growing voter apathy? Quickly.
No. I mean, yes, for continuous voter registration to be meaningful, there must be continuous voter civic education. Of course, that is lacking also, and therefore we have a directly proportional less number of voters registered so far. And whatever it is, that is their business. But I know that there are budget problems like all government institutions. They have been having their commissioner poor. That is what they are in the process of filling now. But all said and done, IEBC, it should be continuously in the villages telling people they need to get registered, going to schools to see which children have attained voter registration age. That one does not require too much of them, but they don't do that. But also for us as citizens, we also need to wake up and be serious with our country and know that it is our duty to register as voters. It is our duty to present ourselves and vote for the people who can take this country where we want it to be.
Council Steve Mogaka, he is giving us his views as we continue with the interviews for the IEBC commissioners. There is still about just about another 30 to 40 minutes for Mr. Francis Wanderi, who is being interviewed right now at the Kenyatta International Convention Center. Let's rejoin that interview. We shall take an overall look, especially when it comes to results management at the end of this interview.
And the following money that was properly utilized. So I thought.
And the picture that you can see is Mr. Francis Wanderi, who is a former director of the Export Processing Zones Authority, being interviewed, and he is one of those who are wishing to become a commissioner of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. The interviews started last week and they will run until the 22nd of July, 3 candidates per day. And over that period of time, we shall find out who. And after that period of time, the selection panel that chaired by Dr. Elizabeth Muli will give us the final details of that. My name is Daniel Wahome. Our sign language interpreter, the face at the bottom right of your screen, is Ann Wangeshi. And as we close this conversation around the interviews, I'm with Council Steve Mogaka. And Council Mogaka, something that keeps on coming up again and again and again is what we mentioned before. How to engage the public to ensure that they keep registering as voters and also consistently check that their details are correctly entered in the IEBC voter roll.
Yeah, indeed, that is the core or the key result area for IEBC. We need to create an online platform where people need to register from wherever they are, not necessarily having to present themselves at IEBC offices or at the polling station where they are going to cast their vote. So be it as it may, the duty is on IEBC. But as I said before we went off, the duty is equally on us citizens, because this is our country and everybody has a responsibility for the leadership that ascends to power in this country. And there is no way to have a say on that unless you are a registered voter. So that is an exercise, even where leadership seeking to be elected are also required to do their bit to conduct civic education, so that as we were hearing during the 2013-2017 elections, since elections is about numbers, where others say you have to unleash the brutality of your numbers, obviously you just can't have them unless you are registered.
Something else that's coming up, and we witnessed this also during the interviews for the office of the Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya, is how independent bodies set up in the Constitution, you can think of the National Police Service Commission, think of the Judicial Service Commission, the judiciary, the legislature itself is considered as an independent arm, and now we've got the IEBC. How then does the Commission work to ensure that there is proper relationship with the Register of Political Parties? That's an office under the state. You've got the Treasury, people who provide the funding, the National Police Service Commission that operates, when it comes to security. And there is a matter that's coming up about, IDs for one to register as a voter. That is through the State Department for the Interior and Coordination of National Government.
Yeah, indeed, while we agree that IEBC is independent, it is functionally independent, but it is dependent on other agencies and actors for it to discharge its mandate, because they cannot do without the National Registration Bureau, because that is the agency, the state agency that has a database of all the registered adults in this country. They cannot do without the National Police Service, because elections are high voltage and sometimes can degenerate to insecurity, and therefore the National Police Service must come in handy. They cannot do without other agencies like the judiciary, because where there is a dispute in decision making, right from registering a voter into nomination of candidates, into the processes involved in voter management, into declaration of results, all those are areas that cannot be above scrutiny without involving the judicial eyes in it. So they cannot be independent. They are dependent on other actors for them to discharge their responsibility.
Counsel Stephen Mogaka, thank you very much for your time this morning, your insight into this and the interrelation that happens between bodies independent and those that are under the legislature and also under the executive. Well, we shall continue with our news bulletin. Jackie Wambiru is joining us at 1 p.m. for our lunchtime news bulletin. And remember that at 2 o'clock, the interviews continue, and former Vice Chair of the Law Society of Kenya, Advocate Harriet Chigai, will be being interviewed by the selection panel. She also is one of the candidates for Commissioner of the IEBC. Thank you for being with us this morning. My name is Daniel Wahome. Our sign language interpreter has been Ann Wangeshi, and on behalf of the team that put this together, and you, our viewers, say thank you very much.